We've noticed something over the years, something that breaks our hearts and that we think breaks the heart of God too. It's no longer the norm that individuals or families have had a positive experience with church or any experience at all. So many of our neighbors and coworkers and friends and family members don't have any interest in the local church altogether. And we want to change that. Why? Because we believe when it's working right, the local church is the hope of the world. We believe that there really is no organization with as much potential to change hearts and transform lives and empower the next generation and make a lasting difference in the world as the local church. And so with God's help, we want to be a light in what may seem like a dark world. And we want that light to start shining right here in the St. Croix Valley. And if you think you're too far gone, we'd love to be the ones to tell you God will always leave the light on. So whether you've been in church your whole life or have never stepped foot in church before, we're excited to open our doors to you and to welcome you to the place where real people and a real God meet. We're glad that you could be with us today.
Hey, good morning, Midcurrent Church. How you doing today? Hey, awesome. My name is not Brian Smith. My name is Sten, and I'm the pastor here, and we're so glad to have you with us. Brian is away on a very well-needed week of vacation, and so when he's gone, they scrape the bottom of the barrel to find any warm soul who could stand in his place, and so you've all got me here today. But that doesn't matter. We're going to have a great morning together. I'm going to invite you to stand right now. We're going to kick off singing a song that truthfully is one of my favorites. It's a song called The Battle Belongs, and it gives us a chance to remind ourselves that no matter what battle it is we're fighting, this is a place coming before our God, giving our hearts to Him, is a place that we can fight those battles the best. And so we're going to sing this out here together today.
When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain moved. And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, let's sing this out. So when I fight, I will fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I will lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me?
this out with me.
And King of endless worth, there's no crown above you. Take your rightful place here in my life, here in my life.
Sing that again, King of endless worth.
King of endless worth, there's no crown above you. Take your rightful place here in my life, here in my life.
Sing this with Steph.
God of boundless love, tearing down my idols. Every battle won, here in your light, here in your light. Come and change my heart, show me who you are. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like you. Take my heart, my soul, I give you control. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like you. Center of my world, nothing comes before you. There's no place I'd rather be. Found in your name, found in your name. Found in your name, found in your name. So come and change my heart, show me who you are. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like you. Take my heart, my soul, I give you control. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like you. I wanna be like you. So let your heart be our heart, let your will be our will. Jesus, Jesus, more of you. Let us see what you see, let your dreams be our dreams. Jesus, Jesus, more of you. Let this house shake with praise as the church shouts your name. Jesus, Jesus, more of you. With our hands lifted high, we surrender our lives. Jesus, Jesus, more of you. Come and change my heart, show me who you are. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like you. Take my heart, my soul, I give you control. I wanna be like you, I wanna be like this house shake with praise as the church shouts your name. Jesus, Jesus, more of you. With our hands lifted high, we surrender our lives. Jesus, Jesus, more of you.
Amen. Hey, we're going to keep singing here in just a second. But before we do, I just want to remind us that this is a time of year. This this Easter season, especially where it seems like the stories we read in Scripture and just the stories we tell about this time of year, they seem to always refer to Jesus as this king, right? Specifically, as we read these stories, they talk about Jesus, the King of the Jews. And regardless of how it is that we refer to Jesus right now, the truth is he is that king. He is our king, and there is no king like him. No king worthy of our hearts, no king worthy of our priorities, no king worthy of our attention and our praise, and even what we're doing here, our worship. There is no king who is worthy of any of it other than this King Jesus, who we celebrate here in this place, who we celebrate especially this time of year. And so we're going to keep singing, and Steph is going to keep leading us to focus our hearts and our minds on this King, who is like no other. And so I invite you to use these moments here and to use these words and to use these songs maybe as your prayer. That right now in your life, you would put Jesus rightfully on top of the throne that he deserves to sit on in your life, in your world, in your places of influence every single day. This song and this next moment will give us the chance to orient ourselves, to orient our lives, and to place Jesus at the very top. Let's sing here together.
Table for
God, this morning we stand before you, God, and we acknowledge, God, I acknowledge that it is so easy. I do this all the time. It is so easy to put other things first, to put bigger things first, to put newer things first, to put shinier things first, to put ourselves first if we somehow think that might get us ahead or get us to climb another level to the top. God, it's so easy to put so many other things first. But this morning, God, this season, God, this Easter season, we want to do everything we can to put your son, Jesus, first. There is no other king who is worthy of anything we've got to offer, God. There is no other object, no other possession. God, there is nothing that is worthy of our utmost attention like you are. And God, we believe that when you have our attention, when you are first in our life, God, we believe you honor and you bless our faithfulness to you in ways that we may not be able to imagine, but that we experience when we follow after you, God, as the first and the one and the only. So God, we thank you today for your son, this King Jesus, who is a king like no other. It is in his name, the powerful name of your son Jesus, that we pray here today, that we open our hearts to today. It is in his name, Jesus, we pray these things. Amen. Go ahead and grab a seat.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midcurrent Church. My name is PJ. We are so excited that you guys decided to join us today, and I want to welcome you here. So for me in my life, when I'm thinking about my life or I'm thinking about life in general, I like to learn from things that have been around for a long time, things that have stood the test of time and ideas that have stood the test of time. And one of those places that I like to learn from is Stoic philosophy. So if you don't know what Stoic philosophy is, it's a philosophy from the ancient Greeks that was popularized by the Romans, and it's a way of looking at life. And one of the core kind of tenets of this philosophy is the idea of amor fati. So amor fati is a Latin phrase that basically means loving fate or loving what is. And another philosopher, Nietzsche, a little bit more modern day, has an interesting quote that I'm going to read to you. It says that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backwards, not in all eternity, not merely to bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but to love it. And I love this idea. I love this idea of the things in our lives are a matter of perspective, and we can choose to embrace those things in our lives, or we can choose to find the fault in them. Now, this is a simple idea, but it's definitely not an easy one. I found myself having a hard time with this yesterday when we got 12 inches of snow on April 1st. That fate didn't go over very well with me. It didn't go over very well with me that our street wasn't plowed when we had to take our son with soccer. And also, I wasn't loving that fate when my snowblower got stuck a bunch of times in the wet, heavy snow. But this is an idea that I think can percolate throughout our lives. And I think there's no better example of this than Jesus in the story of Easter. That was a pretty big fate to take on, and that was a pretty big thing to do for all of us. And Jesus didn't hide from that. He didn't whine about it. He didn't complain. He didn't try to get out of it. He embraced it. So there's a tremendous opportunity for us next week to celebrate that fate and the gift that it gave to all of us. So we're going to celebrate next Sunday, Easter Sunday. We're going to have 2 services at our regular times, 9 and 10:30. We would love for you to join us. We would love for you to invite your neighbors, your family, your friends. In fact, we have postcards out on the welcome desk that you can hand out or put into people's mailboxes. But we're going to have an amazing time, and we are going to be here celebrating that sacrifice. Another awesome event that we have coming up here that you can say the date for is on April 30th. It's our Child Dedication Day. Our Child Dedication Day celebrates the first step in the beginning of a child's journey to know and follow Jesus. There's more information on the Church Center app. You can sign up and register on the Church Center app as well. It's going to be another really fun day here at Midcurrent. With all these awesome events and all the amazing things that we have going on here at Midcurrent, one of the things that makes that possible is your generosity. And so if you feel inclined to contribute to these ideas and contribute to this church and the mission of this church to create places and spaces where real God and real people can meet, I would encourage you to give back. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that, from the collection box in the back, texting from your smartphone, the Church Center app. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can give back to Midcurrent. Now, if you're new here today, we expect nothing from you, but we would love to meet you. And if you could do us a favor, fill out one of these connection cards and drop this bottom piece in one of the collection boxes in the back. It's a tremendous opportunity to get to know people here at Midcurrent, to learn more about what's going on, and be connected with a vibrant community here. So with all of that, that is it for me, and we're going to get back to Pastor Sten Carlson here in the fourth and final installment of Bystander.
For some reason, I have never really forgotten the moment that I went to see The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in theaters when it came out for the very first time. I was in college. The movie was just released, and I think we got tickets for one of its, first, premieres, showings. I think it was like 11 p.m. or something like that on a Friday night. And there was a massive snowstorm in Chicago, but that didn't stop us. We braved our way through the storm to go see this epic movie. And that wasn't the only memorable part of the evening. I, in fact, maybe more so than that, I can remember the emotion that welled up inside of me during the final epic battle scene. I may or may not have gotten even a little misty-eyed in the theater there. Something resonated as I sat there watching up on the big screen. Something resonated so deeply inside of me with these siblings, who are banding together to battle the White Witch. I saw me and my siblings in them, and then especially, this was the moment here, when the two brothers, Peter and Edmund, when they charge into battle, mounted on their horses, their swords drawn, screaming out, they're yelling like, "For Aslan," right? And they're charging down the hill together, right? I couldn't help in that moment to get this glimpse, to get this flash of me and my older brother, right? Standing side by side together to fight the battles that we experience together as we grow older. There in that moment, I felt like, man, that's us. That's me and him together. That's us. And one of those brothers, that's me. Welled up with emotion inside of me. I think this moment was an example of that. I think there's something really powerful about seeing yourself in someone, or seeing yourself, on screen. And no, I don't mean literally, seeing yourself on the screen. I mean seeing a character whose personality matches yours, whose gifts and talents and interests maybe, and hopes and dreams and in life circumstances seem to resemble yours to some degree. A quick side note here, we actually talk about this concept. We talk about this thing kind of, here at church, right? No one here is on the big screen, but we do want people who walk through our doors to see themselves. We talk about this. People want to see themselves. We want them to see someone greeting them at the front door, or serving them coffee, or playing in the band, or, standing up here on the stage that resembles them. That resembles their age, or their stage of life, or their gender, or their hobbies, or their likes, or their interests, or their family makeup, etc. Whether it is at church, or whether it's on the athletic field with some athlete that we look up to, or whether it's on the concert stage, or whether it's on the movie screen, there is something very powerful about seeing yourself in the people that you follow, or in the stories that catch your attention. And there is actually one character in the story of Jesus that we have been following. There's actually one character in the story of Jesus and his ultimately his death on the cross that truthfully is you and is me. Every one of us here today, despite how different we are, every one of us here today will be able to or should be able to see ourselves in him. And that doesn't always happen that way with the characters we see, right? If you're not a dude with an older brother, you may not identify with Peter and Edmund from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe like I did. I may not identify with the characters in, Desperate Housewives because, well, hopefully that's obvious for a lot of reasons here today, right? But we may not always identify with everybody. That's what I think makes this character so fascinating. The character I want to examine today is truly all of us. And I want us to step into his world here together today. I want us to step into his world and his experience to get a glimpse of his view of Jesus and his view of the cross. That is the plan in the final week of our series. Bystander, if you have not joined us for any part of this series yet, let me fill you in on what it is all about. This story of Jesus' death, it bobs and it weaves through a wide variety of men and women who are all gathered either at the cross or who are gathered or just found themselves along the pathway that led Jesus to the cross. And despite the part that they played or despite their role or who they were in the ancient world, they are people, as we have been seeing all month long, they are people who are not all that different than you and me. And they open up, each of them opens up new angles, new sight lines of vision on the cross and on Jesus. And so as we have been journeying toward Easter, it has been my goal that we would take a look at Jesus and that we would take a look at the cross through their eyes, these bystanders, that we would take a look at Jesus and the cross through their eyes to see what it is that we learn from the people who were there. And so today we're going to look at the story of someone who truly, was there right down at the 11th hour. And interestingly enough, he, at least that we know of, he never actually encounters Jesus face to face. He never talked to him, never even crossed paths or rubbed shoulders with him based on what we read. But his life was forever changed because of Jesus. And it's his story that I want to examine today. His name is Barabbas. Truthfully, Barabbas is a pretty minor character in the story of Jesus' death. There isn't a lot that is said about him, and yet what happens to him is a pretty major thing. It's a pretty minor character, but his story is a pretty major thing for us. What happens to him paints a picture for us that we need to pay attention to, because as I mentioned at the start of all this, his story is our story. His story is your story, and his story is my story. And we're going to read what's written about this man named Barabbas in the New Testament book of Matthew. This was just Matthew recording about the life of Jesus that he experienced. And so we're going to read what's written about Barabbas in Matthew chapter 27. And at the time when Barabbas enters into the story of Jesus, Jesus is on trial, so to speak, in front of Pontius Pilate. And if you were here with us last week or if you tuned in online, we actually examined Pilate's part in this whole story last week. The religious leaders in that day, they were threatened by Jesus and by the following that he had amassed and the attention that he had seemed to attract. And so they wanted to, quite frankly, they wanted to get rid of Jesus. All the Jewish leaders did, the religious priests and all the top dogs. But if they wanted to take him out, which they did, they would need Pilate, the governor of this Roman territory, to hand down a death sentence if that's what they wanted. They couldn't make those decisions on their own. And so Jesus is dragged before Pilate. And Jesus' fate now rests in Pilate's hand. And as we discovered last week, just by way of quick review here, as we discovered last week, Pilate is remembered as the man who could not make up his mind. His indecision regarding Jesus proved to be deadly. He knew Jesus was an innocent man, and yet he refused to stand with Jesus. Right? He was content to just kind of put the decision off, or worse yet, he was content to just let other people make the decision for him. And the whole scenario teaches us of the danger of this kind of indecision when it comes to Jesus. It is a reminder for us, I think, that real evil is not always the result of hate and of malice, but sometimes just moral indifference. Right? It's our unwillingness to choose to stand with Jesus when we sense that he is worth standing with. So that's a little review of what we discussed last week, but it's also the very same scene that begins to then overlap with the scene in which we are introduced to Barabbas. And so that's why I start there as we meet this character. And that's where we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 27. It says this. Now, it was the governor, this is Pilate, it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. Pilate, truthfully, instituted this custom as a way to, win favor with the masses. He wanted to do things which, kind of endeared the people to him. And so the time had come at that point in the year, the time had come for him to release one prisoner to the people's choosing. And so here's verse 16. It says this. This year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. And he, as I mentioned to you, Barabbas is our bystander today. Maybe the ultimate bystander in this whole deal, Barabbas. He was known to have victimized, some of the, he victimized some of the wealthy upper class in Israel and some of the wealthy upper class in Rome, and he, caused all sorts of trouble, this revolutionary. He committed robbery or theft, and as we read, he actually, committed murder in the process of some of the chaos that he would, was known to have stirred up. And so he was a notorious criminal, a clear threat for a lot of different reasons, right? He was a clear threat to just about everyone. Okay, and at the same time, Jesus was also in their, custody, so to speak. Seemingly a threat to nobody, really. I mean, the claims against him are like, he's claiming to be king of the Jews. He's a threat to nobody, really. And Pilate, is clearly kind of presented with a choice here, nonetheless. Here's verse 17. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, Pilate asked them, which one? This was the custom every year, and the people are there for it. He says, which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Who do you want? He asked the crowds. He asked the people, who do you want? You want Barabbas or do you want Jesus? Truthfully, there was plenty of reasons that Pilate would have preferred. I mean, we kind of read this last week. There are plenty of reasons why Pilate would have preferred to and was even leaning towards the release of Jesus. I mean, number one, Pilate, after a number of investigations, Pilate found him to be innocent. And number two, Pilate's wife, this is fascinating that we read in Matthew's account of this whole deal. Pilate's wife, and guys, this is a lesson straight from the Bible for us and how we got to listen to our wives, okay? Pilate's wife, in this whole scenario, if you read in Matthew, she sends him a note. She sends a message to Pilate telling him that she had a dream that they, should not get their hands dirty with this Jesus guy. She's saying, I wouldn't get messed up with this. And so Pilate's leaning towards releasing him anyway. His wife is going man, let's not get messed up with this. But Pilate, he doesn't listen to his wife, and he gives the people, all the crowds gathered there, he gives the people the choice. He puts the decision in their hands for who it is that he will release. Verse 21 says, the crowds shouted back, Barabbas! We want Barabbas. Pilate responded to them, then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? They shouted back, crucify him. Why? Pilate demanded. What crime? He knows it. He knows the dude's innocent. He says, what crime has he committed? But the mob roared even louder. Crucify him, they yelled. And Pilate saw, verse 24, Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So if we skip down a little bit, It says, he noticed this, so Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, and then he turned him over to the soldiers to be crucified, right? But Barabbas was released. And truthfully, friends, that is all we know. That is all that is said of Barabbas, really. This is it. This is only, there's nothing prior. There's not a lot that comes after this. This is really all we know of him. This is all we know of his story. And yet, as I read this story, as I read about this swap that was made, right? Jesus for Barabbas, at least me personally, I can't help but think about this whole scenario through the eyes of Barabbas, or our bystander today. I can't help but wonder about his experience, and I can't help but wonder about everything that is not written about him. Everything that we do not know, that was not written about this whole exchange and about this whole set of circumstances through his eyes. We know the outcome, but I can't help but wonder, what about everything else? What about everything that led up to it? What was that like? What story, if we thought about it, what story could that possibly tell from the perspective of Barabbas? Interestingly enough, author and New Testament scholar Richard Bauckham, he actually paints a pretty compelling picture of what it very well could have been like. We don't know for sure, but he paints a pretty compelling picture of this whole scenario through the eyes and through the experience of Barabbas. And I want to read it for you today. I was gripped by his picture of what it could have been like, and so it's a slightly longer excerpt here, but I want to read it for you. And so here's my invitation to you maybe today. I don't know, maybe close your eyes, maybe sit back for a minute and do what you can to put yourself in that place, in that day. Put yourself in the shoes of Barabbas, this revolutionary, murderous criminal on that day. Richard Bauckham imagines it all like this. Barabbas was sitting in his dark and dirty cell, listening carefully to the crowds milling around in the courtyard outside. There was more noise than usual today. He was sitting and waiting for the time, not far off now, when the guards would come fetch him and take him to begin the last journey that he would ever make. From outside the city walls, the sound of hammering and sawing could already be heard clearly as local tradesmen, chatting and joking among themselves, toiled to construct the awful machinery of capital punishment. Of course, he, Barabbas, deserved what was coming. He had deprived others of life, and according to Roman law, his just desert lay in the impalement of his own life in the gallows. Even so, he could hardly bring himself to think about what lay ahead. He had seen men crucified before. He had seen the fear and the agony etched in their faces, and he knew it could take a very long time to die. And although he didn't like to admit it, even to himself, he was scared. Not of death, but of this particular way of dying. There was no glory in crucifixion, only humiliation and mockery. Barabbas just hoped he could summon enough willpower, at least, to deny the crowd the satisfaction of a broken and whimpering victim, if only things had worked out differently. Now, though, it was too late for pondering what might have been. Today, Barabbas was to be punished for his crimes. Today, justice would be done. Outside, the crowds were getting excited. Barabbas wondered what could be causing so much fuss. An hour or so ago, they had taken Jesus, a carpenter from Nazareth, outside for his trial. Jesus had raised some eyebrows by speaking out against Jewish authorities, but so far as Barabbas knew, he hadn't committed any serious crimes. Of course, he would be humiliated, perhaps given a savage beating to keep the crowds happy, and then released back into the obscurity from which he had come. The yelling of the crowds grew even louder. Barabbas couldn't hear everything from his cell, but a few phrases he did manage to pick out froze his blood. "We want Barabbas," was one of them. And "crucify him. Crucify him," another. This is it, he thought to himself. Not long now, and it will all be over. There were a few footsteps approaching outside in the corridor. Barabbas felt his stomach muscle tense involuntarily, and a sudden nausea overwhelmed him as the bolts of the door were drawn back. And as the door opened, he muttered a prayer under his breath. And what happened next took several minutes to sink in. Surely, there must have been some mistake. He repeated the guard's words to himself. "All right, Barabbas, you can go. You're a free man. Don't ask me why, but they're going to crucify Jesus of Nazareth instead of you." Midcurrent Church, this is your story, and this is my story. We are Barabbas. I'm not saying that any of us are revolutionaries. I'm not saying that any of us are robbers and thieves and murderers. I'm not saying that. But we are all guilty. Every single one of us, starting with yours truly right here. We are all guilty of crimes against God, crimes that carry a very heavy penalty. Those crimes are our sins against God and against one another. And the Bible tells us, Scripture tells us, that the penalty for our sin was death. They carried a death sentence, a spiritual and an eternal separation from the God that designed us. And yet the day that Jesus hung on the cross represents the day that God said to you and to me, "You're free." Sten, Mark, Mike, John, Joe, you can go now. You're a free man. Jane, Jen, Joan, Martha, Mary, Sarah, you can go now. You're a free woman. Right? We got to see in this that God sent Jesus to die instead of you and me, to pay the price, right? To fulfill the sentence that we deserve to have brought down on us. And we can see that so plain and so clear in this brief story, in this brief mention of Barabbas. His limited introduction here in the story of Jesus teaches us a limitless truth about Jesus, right? That Jesus endured the cross on behalf of guilty people everywhere for all time. Right? This is what we see in this one exchange. Jesus willingly, intentionally endured the cross, intentionally endured his own death on behalf of guilty people across the planet from age to age. This was Jesus' mission on earth. It wasn't to identify all of the guilty people. It wasn't to catch them all red-handed, right? It wasn't to catch them in the act of sin. It wasn't to heap guilt on all of the guilty people. It wasn't to prove that people were guilty or to somehow punish people or to help them understand God's anger, on all of the guilty people. No, it was to set them free. He voluntarily clothes himself in prison stripes to secure our freedom. This is precisely why Good Friday, which is just less than a week away now, is precisely why Good Friday was so good for you and for me. Jesus took our place. He took our place so that we no longer had to deal with the penalty for the mistakes that we made. He took our place so that we no longer had to deal with the penalty for the past that we regret, or for the flaws that we are also mindful of, or for the failure that we experienced, or for the temptation that we gave into again and again and again, or for the hurts that we caused, or for the pain that we inflicted, or for the damage that we have done. He took our place so that we didn't have to experience the penalty of any of that. I'm not saying that we no longer had to deal with the pain in the consequences, right? Just the penalty, just the death sentence associated with all of it. Think of Barabbas in a way. Dude is walking away scot-free. That's what happens in the story. Jesus or Barabbas? The crowd says Barabbas, and he walks away. Right? Dude is walking away scot-free, but right back into the very community filled with the people that he hurt and that he robbed and that he victimized, right? It wasn't going to be a cakewalk. That's not what freedom meant. It wasn't going to be a cakewalk for him, but the bigger story is that he was no longer walking the plank to his untimely death. And it's actually that walk back out onto the streets. If we think about his story once again, this bystander to the whole deal, it's that walk, his walk back out onto the streets, that gets me thinking too. So fascinated, continually fascinated by what we could only imagine of Barabbas and the story that we aren't told, that he lived with his own life. And so I wonder, how much did Barabbas know of Jesus? As he walked out of his prison cell and joined the crowds out on the busy streets in Jerusalem, how much did he grasp of the man that just took his place? Did he care? Did he try to find out more? Did he try to understand? Did he try to make any sense of what had just happened to him? Did he linger around for a while, waiting to maybe even get a glimpse of Jesus? Or did he make a swift exit out of town, out the back door? Maybe he traveled on foot, on the road to Emmaus, and maybe as he exited town, maybe the cross on the hilltop of Golgotha, maybe it started to come into view the further he got out of town. And if so, did he ever stop and look back? Did he look up to see what they were doing to the man that took his place? And what effect might it have had on him? What, if anything, would he have felt? Relief? Regret? Pity? Shame? Indifference? Or maybe, we don't know, maybe eternal gratitude. What would he have felt in that moment? Makes me think about you and me, and it makes me think about how you and I respond. Makes me wonder how much we really grasp of the man who took our place. It makes me wonder how much we care, how much we try to find out more, or how much we try to make sense of it all. It makes me wonder how often we pause, and how often we stop, and how often we look back. How often we stop and consider the price that was paid for the life and the future and the eternity that we have been given. Wherever you find yourself today, what I want you to consider and what I want you to ask yourself today is this: how will you, ask yourself, how will I respond to the one who set me free? How will you respond today, this week, this month, this Easter, this year? How will you respond to the one that set you free? Will you be driven to learn more? Will you stop and look back? Will you be driven to learn more about the man who took your place? to find out more or to understand more about what happened and, more importantly, why it happened and why it happened for you? Would you give more of your heart back to Him? Would you begin a new habit, or would you cultivate a new spiritual discipline? Maybe your prayer would be, some of the song that Steph just sang, right? Let your heart be my heart. Maybe that's your response. Let me see what you see. Let your dreams be my dreams. Let the things that you care about be the things that I care about. Let your priorities in the world, Jesus, become my priorities in this world, in my family, in my marriage, in my neighborhood, in my community, in my school, and in the very places that you have set my feet every day. If there was ever a chance to stop, to look back, and to start over, if there was ever a chance for a fresh start in this life, despite the past that you lived and the crimes that you committed, if there was ever a time for a fresh start in life, this Good Friday, this Easter week, this Easter season is it. It is your get out of jail free moment. The question is, what will you do with it? Let me pray. God, we give you thanks for this scene that we drop into, God. It's not just a scene, God. It is a earth-shattering moment in history. God, as we kind of center in, we're not there yet on the calendar, but as we kind of center in on this Good Friday moment, God, the day that was so good for us because you took our place. God, I can't help but think about this whole story through the eyes of the one who literally traded places with your son, Jesus, God. We do not know what happened about him, what happened to him, God. We don't know how he responded. But as we put ourselves in his shoes, God, as we see the similarities between us and him, as we realize, man, there are crimes that we have committed against this God that we love, and that there's a penalty for it, God, as we recognize that Jesus took our place so that we no longer had to experience the penalty, God, I pray, we don't know what happened to Barabbas, but I pray that something inside of us would compel us to respond. Somehow, some way. It's going to be different for all of us. For some, it's going to be a tiny baby step in one direction. For some, it's going to be a giant step in a new direction, God. But I pray that there will be something inside of us that compels us to respond to you, to stop, to look back, to give you more of ourselves as a way to express our unending gratitude for the life that you have offered to us and the future that you have cultivated for each of us. God, help us to be fixed on you. God, not your anger, not your wrath for the things that we have done wrong. God, help us to be fixated on the love that you have for all of us. Even while we were sinners, God, help us to be fixated on the love that you have for us, a love that was so strong that it compelled you to send your son Jesus to the cross for us. We give you thanks for it. And we pray these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Hey, thanks for being here today. We are absolutely thrilled and excited for the opportunity we have next week to celebrate Easter here in this place. We anticipate this room, this building being packed at 9 and 10:30, and we hope that you are a part of the crowds that are moving in and out of here. Grab a postcard or 2 or 3 or 4 on your way out to pass on to anyone you want to join you here next week. And if you are in need of prayer today, please do not walk out of here without stopping to see someone from our prayer team right up here in the front. Other than that, have a great week, and we will plan to see you right back here next Sunday as we celebrate Easter at Midcurrent. God bless you.